the work of the church is, by its nature, social. So how does Dunbar's number relate to this? And Schneider posits the theory that the optimal size for a church is going to be between 120 and 150, maybe even as high as 170. But that's kind of the sweet spot.
Welcome back to the Rural Renewal Podcast. We are so grateful that you keep coming back and listening to us. And Chris, do you have any thoughts for ministry during hard times?
Do I have any thoughts? That's
Yes.
a good question. No, as I think everyone who finds himself in a ministry position or just who finds himself in a caring position in life, there are sometimes when you walk with other people through life or walk with a community through life, there are going to be times where really hard things happen. We'll go into the specifics, but in our community in the last little bit here, there's been a couple of really hard things that have happened that happen in communities everywhere, and that are when you're connected to them and when you are kind of in a place where you're trying to help out with them. They're heavy, and they can really they can kind of drain you. So in terms of do I have any thoughts about what to do about that? Good question. No, I mean I think we got some good advice from a mentor of ours back when we were in seminary, which sometimes when life gets really crazy, we laugh at now because it's not always possible. But Kathleen, I'll let you what was the advice about how we should try to think about our time? It actually was a really good idea, even if it's not always possible in ministry. So.
Yeah, so he had the day split up in thirds, and he said that you shouldn't work more than 2/3 together. So if you work a morning and an afternoon, you should take the evening off. Or if you work an evening and then the next morning, you should take the afternoon off. And I think there is a lot of value in thinking about your schedule that way. And I've heard other people say, even if you have a meeting in the evening that lasts 30 minutes, that should be counted as working during that time. And I think there's a lot of value in it. I think that the hard thing is there are seasons where you don't necessarily have control over your thirds. And so what do you do in those kinds of situations? I think last Saturday, I was like, okay, I'm not going to do anything extra today. If work comes on my plate because we have some stuff going on that we can't control, I'll tend to that. But I'm not going to go sit at my computer and do work. And so I think trying to find those pockets. I know our kids are on school vacation this week, and we're not going anywhere or doing anything special. But one of our kids was like, "I really want to go skiing." So I'm like, "Okay, I really need to carve this out." So I think tomorrow her and I are gonna go skiing, and trying to carve out some of those times. I think I've recognized in the last few days, I can't. The over and beyond that I try to do a lot of times, I just don't have the capacity to do that, and being okay with that and not feeling guilty about that. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things he used to say to us was, because obviously at times you're going to end up doing, you're not going to, if you break your day up into thirds, sometimes you're going to do 3 of those thirds in a row, sometimes 4. And I think the other thing he said was, you just got to recognize when you're getting into those spaces that you're your capacity to really be present and in what you're doing is going to be diminished. We are limited creatures created by a limitless God, but we are very limited creatures. And so we just have to recognize that. And that it's good to keep stock of kind of where you're at and not to just pretend you can keep doing stuff. Again, sometimes, ministry is such that sometimes it feels like you have to just keep doing stuff. And sometimes you kind of almost have to just keep doing stuff, but recognize like you do have to find the space to stop. I think, we have, I wouldn't say we're always perfect at this by any stretch of the imagination. Inevitably, if you're in ministry, you're going to find lots of things to fill the space in your days and things and to keep you busy. And then there's going to be things that you care about that you have to kind of put on top of that. But at the same time, I think you do have to, one thing that we have found for us, and part of this is like learning what's really important for you, right? Like the church gives us 4 weeks off a year. We take 4 Sundays a year. I know that's not some pastors, that's a real challenge for, we do that. And for the most part, we take the better part of those 4 weeks off. As a matter of fact, whenever we, for some reason, have a time where maybe the week that we're supposed to take off turns into like a half week, I spend 6 months being like, why did we do that? Because I recognize the need for it, particularly. I mean, I think we also definitely try to take a Sabbath day, really work on that each day, and to guard a Sabbath day each week. That is, depending on the schedule of our kids, can be more or less effective in terms of like refreshing the battery. Like we usually do stop like churchy work for a day each week.
Yes.
Parenting, doesn't stop. And God did design us to be parents 24/7. Well, I don't know, to at least sort of be parents 24/7. Somebody's going to keep the kids going. So in that regard, it doesn't always. It's not as if it always feels entirely restful, but at least it gives us space from what we're doing. I think that's important to the extent that you can. Again, obviously things happen, and I think for us, and we've taken one sabbatical in 16 years, but we did take a sabbatical, and I think that's also like find space to if you can do it every 7 years, awesome. But try to have it as an understanding. I have found our congregation personally, I mean, congregations are all over the map on this, but I found our congregation, they want us to not, their desire is not to have us burn out. And if your congregation wants you to burn out, pray for them, because that's not healthy for you or them. They want us to have the space to be who we are, which is limited human beings.
I would agree. And I think this weekend I was reflecting on we do meals as a church for people who, have been sick or, who are for whatever reason could use meals. And we have a whole system on how we do it. And sometimes I'm one of the organizers. That's just one of my gifts. Sometimes other people are organizers. And but I was thinking about one particular situation where I was like, they really could use meals. And if they really could use meals, I'm probably not the person who needs to organize it right now. I need to express that to my to the diaconate. Like I don't have the capacity to do this, and they do have the capacity. And most of the time, I'm happy to do that. But I think it's okay to let our congregations know when when things are heavy, not to complain or not to like we're not telling them all the details. I mean, they know what we're dealing with. It's not like they're like, if they don't know, then they were on vacation or something. I don't know. but they
own a small
know
community. They know when you've had a hard week, everybody knows. It's just
Yeah. So I think that we that it's okay to share that in emotionally appropriate ways. And if you feel like you just want to let go and tell them not so nice things because you're so exhausted and so worn out that you can't function, then you need to find some people to connect with. And if you've hit that road and hit that point and you don't have someone, please reach out to us, because we do care for our listeners. And if you need someone to vent to for an hour, we're here for you, because we know how sometimes it's isolating to be a pastor in a rural place. Our email address is podcasts@freshexpressions.com. You are welcome to, it goes directly to my inbox, so no one else is going to see it. But if you do need, and we can help connect you to.
I was going to say, that's the other thing. I mean, we're certainly happy to do that, but also one of the things that we hope we're starting to accomplish with some of the mustard seed initiative of Ascent is that we're connecting people, so that if people do feel isolated in those regards, they have other people that they can kind of rely on. So.
Yeah, and I've found the value of finding people that aren't close by, that have some distance.
Sometimes that's what you need.
Some of the people that I rely on the most live hours and hours away. And I think sometimes that's helpful as well, because you can be a little bit more real with them about your situation. So, and
they often, when you live in a small town, often when you're going through some of the hard stuff, they generally are too, which is okay. And in some ways, how God designed us. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's nice to talk to somebody for whom they can understand the tragedy or whatever might be going on that's hard for a community, the thing that's happened in your community. But they're understanding it from a distance, not from they're dealing with it at the same time as you kind of space.
Yes,
so that can be really healthy and helpful sometimes. Yeah.
And you don't, Chris and I are okay. Our family is okay. We don't have anything going on with us. It's mostly events that happen in our community, and we're just trying to support our community through those events. So we're fine. And we'll, we're taking some rest this week. So it'll be, we're prioritizing those kinds of things. But I think it's a good opportunity to talk about, our mental health is important too. And so we need to make sure that we're tending to that in the midst of caring for others. So that's my plug today. I don't have
no funny story.
We haven't figured what?
No funny story.
Today.
If you live in South Londonderry last year, funny. That's always good for a funny story. But there's some funny stories in the interview. The interview is really good.
There's some good conversations.
There's some good conversation. Sure. We interviewed David Blackwell, who's been on the podcast several times before, and who is really very much part of what's going on with the Mustard Seed Initiative. And so, listen to David and I and Kathleen and I talk about Dunbar's number and weak relationships. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Rural Renewal Podcast. And we have a guest we've had several times with us before. We're excited to have him back with us. This is David Blackwell. David, it's good to see you again.
Hey, great seeing you guys again. Always look forward to seeing you.
Definitely. One of the real blessings of doing the podcast and the work that we've done with Ascent and things like that has been getting to know David, not just on the podcast, but in person. And I guess maybe that brings me to, before we get started with what we're going to talk about today, a quick reminder that part of the reason we're recording this podcast when we're recording it is that Kathleen, myself, and David are all going to be in the same place. And if you have space in your schedule the first week in March, you should be in the same place with us too. Kathleen, where are we going to be?
It's actually the second week.
Sorry.
In March.
Yes.
We are going to be in Northern Virginia at the Ascent Summit. And I know for a lot of you, this is going to come out the day before the actual event. So you probably can't travel to where we are. However, there is a live stream ticket, and we are very excited. There's lots of opportunities to hear the main stage speakers. There's going to be people there like Beth Moore, Ed Stetzer, and several other Charlie Dates. There's going to be a lot of great people there to listen to. So if you're interested, we'll put the link in the show notes for you, and you can still sign up today. Today is the last day you can sign up for the event, but we would love to have you join us, even if you can't be there in person.
Yeah. So thanks for that. And then, so David, today, though, we're going to talk about a couple of articles that are related, that you have. We've talked about some of this in theory before, but we're talking about Dunbar's number, and then kind of related to that, weak relationships. So maybe you can set the stage for us a little bit. What the heck is Dunbar's number, and why would I want a weak relationship?
Well, it's really kind of interesting, and and in full disclosure, this is a lot of David's thinking, kind of pulling some things together, and so your mileage may vary. This is something that is designed to stimulate the thought process as we serve in rural churches. Okay, don't take this as law. I'm not the expert here. I'm just communicating what smarter people have shared. I ran across this for the first time. It was an article by Scott McKnight, and he was referencing an article by a fellow named Howard Schneider. It was in Seedbed in July of 2017, I believe, and the title of it was "The Church and Dunbar's Number." Robin Dunbar was a British researcher and studied the social sciences, and he did some research on the number of relationships that individuals can hold in their lives. He studied, human institutions. He actually also studied some animal. Some of the herds that you see around, things like that, and he reached this conclusion that the maximum number of significant relationships that anyone can hold in their lives is about 150, which is Dunbar's number. 150 is Dunbar's number. You can hold 150 relationships in tension. That's a sociological threshold that we reach. There's actually some neurological limits. It's all your brain can handle. And me, that kind of tells me how big my brain is, because I can handle about 7. So,
I was going 150 is a lot, but
that's a lot for me too. Anyway, the idea behind it is that this is the place. As Schneider related this to the church, he started thinking about, okay, if the church has the primary responsibilities, if our goals in a congregation are to worship faithfully, which is a that's a social interaction, if it is to have koinonia fellowship, genuine concern for each other, which is a social interaction, and if we are looking to witness to the world in some way, proclaim Jesus somehow, that is a social interaction. The work of the church is by its nature social. So how does Dunbar's number relate to this? And Schneider came to the conclusion or he at least posits the theory that the optimal size for a church, not perfect, don't get me wrong, and every church, has its strengths and weaknesses, but the optimal size of a church is going to be between 120 and 150, maybe even as high as 170. But that's kind of the sweet spot where worship and koinonia fellowship and the ability to proclaim Jesus tangibly to the world is kind of at its you're in the Goldilocks zone there between 120 and 150. Doesn't mean there's something wrong with a smaller church or a larger church, but that's the Goldilocks number for churches to truly function as the body of Christ. So I started bouncing off of that, and I started thinking about some of the things that I know from other areas of research and from just anecdotally, and I was sitting there going, man, there really is something to that idea. Biblically, as we start thinking about it, Jesus' church, I am convinced, was counted in Acts chapter 1, where the people gather waiting on the Holy Spirit. They're praying there, and the scriptures say there were about, guess what, 120 in the room that day. That's sort of the people that had really gathered around Jesus relationally. So I'm sitting there going, okay, there might be something to this from church growth materials that we've read for the last generation. They always have talked about breaking the 200 barrier, and they have talked specifically about in leadership circles, in order to quote break the 200 barrier, you've got to totally rearrange the way you serve as a pastor, as a minister in those respects. And it's because the group has become, if you take Dunbar's numbers seriously, once you get into 200, you've lost the ability to have that organic relational connection. You've got to start developing categories and systems and structures in order to bring that many people together in some sort of cohesion. So there's something to Dunbar's number, I think. If you're looking at the sweet spot for ministry, it's somewhere between 120 and 150. Now, very few of us actually get to choose how many people we have in a church, right? It's not something that we can control. So here's the way that number has translated for me. Like I said, organically, the sweet spot's between 120 and 150. But most of us don't, like I said, we don't get to choose that. Our churches are either above that number or below that number.
Yep.
But what that does is that informs the things that we should be that we should be really concentrating on. It informs the area of strength and the area of weakness for our church in representing Jesus well in the world. A church that is above 100 and 150, there's enough critical mass there that you're going to reach out into the world. You're not going to have to push yourself out into ministry, probably. You're going to have enough people in that congregation that are naturally evangelistic. They are missionally focused. They are apostolic in their orientation. There's going to be enough people within that group that they're going to bring those things to the table, or organically.
Yeah.
The hard part for a church that's larger is developing that sense of koinonia, that sense of common bond. One of the things I've heard my friends with larger churches struggle over are the people who anonymously walk in and anonymously walk out. They are not part of the body; they are observers of the body from a distance, and that's a real struggle when you're over 150, and you've just got to work at it. For most of us in rural churches, that's not the area where we fall. We fall on the lower end of Dunbar's number. We are falling, churches of 30, churches of 50, churches of 70. So for us, the struggle is not necessarily developing the relational pieces. It's keeping the missional mindset that comes along with that. That's where Dunbar's number, I think, really affects us. We have to truly be intentional about mission, and it's not just because it is a natural inclination in our smaller groups for us to lean into the relational pieces. And develop. How many times have smaller churches been accused of being closed systems?
Yeah.
We are. They're not friendly people, and if you talk to the people in your church, well, we're friendly. We like people. We sure do. And both of those things are partially true.
Yes.
Within the context of our smaller churches, we are friendly. And within the context of our smaller churches, we don't dislike the people that are coming in, at least on most occasions. But we do have to truly make an intentional effort to open the circle, because our relationships become so tight. They become so self-fulfilling that we really don't make room in our relational circle within our smaller group for other people to break in. Now, I've talked for a whole lot. I've got that leads us to the weak relationship piece, but I want to stop and take a breath. You guys, because I know you guys. I know you want to jump in, so let me give you a space.
I was going to say, for everybody who's excited to hear about weak relationships, we'll get there, we promise. But I first of all, I want to thank you for David, for introducing the idea and some of the article certainly that you referenced to me at least. I have and I agree that that finding ways for particularly for our smaller churches, which is where most everybody who listens to this podcast, probably not everybody, but a lot of people who listen to this podcast are going to kind of fall in that category where they're not where they would see 120 to 150 as is larger than they are, and so and to recognize that does mean in being that we're designed to be able to have most of us can kind of manage that many relationships. Obviously, they're not like. You don't have 150 super intimate relationships, but you can really know 150 people. When we fall smaller than that, particularly if we fall quite a bit smaller than that, 30 or 50 or even 70. One thing that got me thinking is most of us probably then in a smaller place like that have a network outside of that, because we're going to kind of crave now. I mean, obviously that doesn't mean everybody has those relationships, but most of us kind of crave those interactions with other people and knowing those people. And so for me, I was like, well, there's actual real opportunity there, because probably people in our churches, if you have a church of 150 people, it probably is amazing and you can find a real breadth of the types of relationships you can have in that congregation. But I mean, a lot of your relationships, the vast majority of them are probably going to be within that group, particularly if you function kind of in a really relying on each other, the kind of way that you would hope that a church would. But in a smaller church than that, obviously, those relationships are very close, but they also, particularly for people who are not like extreme introverts, who maybe are like, I'm good with my 7. Sure, I could know 150 people, but 7 sounds good to me, which is okay. but for a lot of people, right, for the people who are a little bit, who have a wider circle, it provides there's a lot of connection that people probably have with people outside of church. And I know one thing that I sometimes have thought about with our people, because we definitely, that's true of people in our congregation, is how to kind of help them connect these two circles, right? Not, that, that's not even really the right way to put it. To provide opportunity from other circles that they are part of to overlap with, and then also potentially, feed into the congregational circle and things like that. That there is space there. Actually, there's a lot of opportunity to share the gospel with those who we actually do have pretty close relationships with outside the church. That was one thing that I kind of got thinking about. Kathleen, I shouldn't talk forever either. What were some of your thoughts on the Dunbar's number?
I mean, so first of all, I haven't been part of a church that was that large since I was a child. So some of this is a hypothetical for me. But I do see if you have a church that's too small, you're not able to do all the work that we're called to do in our communities. And so, and that's when you find yourselves getting tired and worn out and not, becoming a little bit more close-knit, and having a hard time opening up your circle, to use Chris's analogy. But I think, and so I've just been thinking about that aspect of it. 150 to me seems like a pretty big number, but at the same time, I could see real value in a church of 150. I think that there's a lot of opportunities that you could do for ministry and mission if you had 150 versus if you only have 20 coming with any regularity. So those are the things that I've been thinking about. I think my question is to you, David. What happens? This is very hypothetical too. What happens if you get beyond the 150? Do you have a church plan? What happens at that point?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that speaks to the values of your individual congregation, and what and perhaps if you're embracing relational ministry, then maybe at that point, as a matter of fact, Snyder in his article specifically says, if you end up as a church between 150 and 200, perhaps that's the point at which you need to hive off into a smaller group, and hive off and multiply.
Yeah.
The ministry. And he goes into, you ought to read the article, folks, if you can find it. Howard Schneider, Seedbed, the church in Dunbar's number, July 2017. Google knows everything.
We'll put it.
Just Google it.
Yeah.
You can find it. And to put it.
We'll
in the show
also put
notes,
it in the show notes. Yeah.
Because it's definitely it's an easy read. It's not it's not going to take you an hour and a half to read the article. It's a 10 minutes, 20 minutes if you want to really like pour over it. And it's good. It's very good. The article's very good.
Yeah. It's a great piece. But yes, perhaps you're thinking about doing a church plant or something like that. You're going to launch another small group, which is going to be probably about 20 people, right?
Yeah.
Something of that nature. And the important thing I think to remember is as we start to wrestle with this thing, it's not it's not as much a church of 120 to 150 is more valuable than another church. It's just that's where everything clicks.
Yeah.
And when we're on one side or the other of that means that there are points of emphasis in our ministries that we need to be aware of. Like I said, for the church that's on the lower end of this, the point of emphasis has to be, as we are seeking to represent Jesus well in the world, is that we are focused on mission. What can we, as a group of 20 followers of Jesus, what does he call us to do and be in this world in which we live, and how do we live that out? We've got to be more intentional on that side of the equation, because the relational part's going to kind of, it's going to naturally. It's going to naturally come to fruition there, and we do need to create when we get to the second half of this thing, finally, weaker relationships, which allow people to step into these things. But Schneider would suggest that once you get to that point, it's time to start thinking about, okay, where can we hive off and multiply the footprint of the kingdom of God in our area or in our communities? It's a fascinating read. Snyder's contention. Go ahead, Chris.
I was just say I thought, because Schneider, at least I thought he did a really good job of kind of going through, the dynamics that change in churches that are large, because obviously churches grow well beyond 200 sometimes and can still definitely do effective ministry. But he was really good, I think, at pointing out, that the church, when it gets to that point, it won't rely on relationships as the organizing principle around which it has to become about and probably that explains a lot about what we kind of see in our larger church dynamics around us, where a church may be organized around often a charismatic figure, but it also might be organized around it could be really good things, right? Like you could be organized around a really solid, this is the mission we do, and it attracts lots of people to this idea, or that is really good about communicating certain things. But it does, you have to really work at that point on finding ways to make sure people are connecting in a relational way so that they can grow in their faith. And we've seen that bigger churches have noticed that, right? That's why we have, that's why there's, small group resources. Everybody has done them, because we recognize, there's going to be people who, but the problem with that is in a bigger setting, and he kind of points this out, is it's very easy for people to kind of sneak in and sneak out. And the people who engage in the smaller groups or the small, in these real relationships certainly grow from them wonderfully. But it's a lot easier in that setting to not do that. And again, just kind of the things to know. But I think, the multiply, we probably don't take seriously enough that multiplying factor. I was thinking about how, we've gotten partway there, maybe as the church, as we thought about like multi-site settings and things like that now, which often aren't, I mean, it depends on the setting, but sometimes multi-sites are not actually, each site is not necessarily that large. But like, what is like that organizing principle? So I think it really did get me thinking a lot about like, what do we need to do? How do we, how do we take this understanding and help us think about how to organize what we're doing in our particular context, right? It's great to think about what other people should be doing in their context. What should I be doing in my context? It's probably a better question. And I do like that on either end of this. I think it provides you with some like and any other ideas? I mean, we're really kind of at the cusp of this, I think, idea of weak connections and how those can be helpful. Particularly, I think, for those of us who fall in the under, lower than the Dunbar's number. But Kathleen, did you have any final reflections or anything like that I'm cutting you off from?
I don't think so. I'm a reflector.
That's fun.
And so, I do really appreciate even thinking about church size in a way that isn't like bigger is better. I think there's a lot of, it's not necessarily outwardly said most of the time that, but there's this like feeling that if you're really big, then that means you're really healthy. And if you're really small, that means you're really unhealthy. And that's not like a specific number. It's just like a general
that's
kind
an
of thing.
Entirely culturally driven idea that like has no basis in any kind of godly idea or scriptural idea. It's entirely based on being Americans and thinking
for sure.
Better.
And so, in our context, if we had 500 people coming to church, that would be amazing. But that would be, I'm trying to think of, that would be a quarter of our town, more than a quarter of our town. So
like a third of our town.
What?
Almost a third, basically a third of our town, but yeah.
A third of our town. So, I think that, but thinking about it less in about numbers, but more about relationships, like what's our capacity for relationships with other people, I think is much more a strong indication of health than the actual number that is coming to church. So those are the things that I'm thinking about. But I think that this goes into the whole conversation about weak relationships. So, David, tell us a little bit about that article that you read and how it connects.
Okay. So this one came from the Billy Graham Institute out of Wheaton College, I think. I'll have to go back. Please put the link in the notes. And
we will. Yes.
I'm totally wrong on that. Just forgive me, and you can say, okay, this guy's crazy. We don't need to talk to him, listen to him anyway. But there, the analysis that was done was on the difference between healthy, smaller rural churches and churches that might be considered unhealthy, smaller rural churches. Both sets of churches had very good, deep, strong relationships amongst their people. The difference was that the healthier churches also had a healthy smattering of what the author referred to as weaker relationships. Weaker relationships means that you don't spend every waking moment together. They may not be your prayer partners. They may not be members of your family. They may not be the people that are in your small group every day. These are people that you might stop in the hallway at church and you'll speak to them for a few moments and you'll talk a little bit about, hey, what's going on with your kids, you'll have some sort of, you will have an acknowledgement of of your commonality in Christ and your commonality in value, but they're not the people that you're going to take a long car trip with. When you're saying, hey, let's all get together and go skiing next weekend, these probably aren't the people that you're calling, not because you don't like them. It's just because that your relationship isn't that deeply connected. And the author says that, or the author suggests that we need a certain number of weaker relationships in our churches in order to allow them to flourish and open the doors for those people. You know, when we were talking earlier about Dunbar's number, we're talking about the need, or the thing that we have to emphasize is that ability to open the circle when we're smaller, because those relationships, the gravitational pull of those strong relationships, the desire for that real community will naturally turn us inward. And so he talks about providing deeper relationships on the or weaker relationships in this process. And then he goes on to define some weaker relationships. He says, perhaps you're going to pull together a service group that's going to go help clean up the park. Well, you don't have to be the best buddies who have just watched the Super Bowl together to join together and rally around that common interest. You'll be there with them for a while. You'll be standing there raking up the leaves and talking together about life for a moment, and then you'll say, "Wow, it was really great to meet you," and then you'll move on. And those types of relationships where we have a genuine openness and friendliness towards each other, but we are not really locked in with each other. Those types of relationships are invaluable in our smaller churches. So how do we go about creating some of those opportunities for weaker relationships, no matter the size of our congregation, because that's where we are inviting those who may not be in a discipling relationship with Christ into a discipling relationship with Christ. I don't know if that did it. Does that kind of cover it? Does that hit the point adequately to at least get us going here, guys?
Yeah, I think so. You know, when I read, it did to me at least. When I read the article, to me, one of the things that an example of this that I have just recently experienced in my life that really kind of helped me with it. I've been leading a men's Bible study in our community that we now host at our church, but we've met at different places over the years. It's been going on since longer. It was happening before we moved here, but I sort of have slowly inherited it. And it has been, we meet on Friday mornings. It's been a group of guys that's ranged in, it's always been a pretty small group. It's ranged in size from 4 when it's been very small to up to 7 or 8, 9 of us at here and there. And we had, and several different times throughout the period, it's mostly been me and retired gentlemen. Occasionally we get people who can work, but often it's hard for people, especially to stick around for a long time, because we meet at 7 on a Friday morning, which is not always conducive to people who are kind of working age. But it's mostly been with retired age gentlemen over the years. And so either they kind of move or they age out, and we had dwindled back down to like three or four of us. And I was like, I think the group may just kind of fizzle, not because we were still having good conversation in the Bible study, but it was a group of us that have been part of this group for, more than 10 years now. And it just, not that it wasn't good, but it had kind of lost some of its energy. And then, mostly by the grace of God and some inviting by a couple of us, and we've all of a sudden have like 3 or 4 new faces who have started coming to the Bible study again. And all of a sudden, it takes on this whole new dynamic because, one, we don't. We're getting to know things about other people, getting to hear, particularly, in this setting, getting to hear some different, different ways that they've encountered Scripture before, or when they're thinking about what it means. I mean, and it brings real dynamic to the group. And I think, over time, obviously, now in that setting, it's a small group, so those relationships, should those gentlemen stick around for a while, they'll become comfortable in the kind of tight relationships that we then need to expand again. But I do think there is that sense that if you have to have some of these, it really brings out the best. The other thing it really made me think about was that I am much more likely to ask somebody to participate in something different or new, or be asked by somebody to participate in something new who doesn't know me as well or I don't know as well. Because if I will, if it's somebody I know really well, I will often know the answer before I ask whether they can do something or not. And if I know they're going to say yes, they already have said yes and they're already doing it. But I have found, it's when. And so in order to challenge one another, we do need these kinds of relationships where we genuinely don't know. We know the person well enough to ask, like, would you like to participate in this ministry or do this, go on this work trip day for the day or do this service project. So we know them well enough to ask, because that's an awkward ask if we don't, some people are good at asking cold on those kinds of things, but it's often awkward. But we don't know them so well to know whether they're going to say yes or not. Because if we knew they were going to say yes, we probably didn't even really ask them. We just kind of put their name on the paper and said, you're going to do this because I know you're going to do it. So I thought that was kind of the way I wrap my head around what these weaker relationships, the power that these weaker relationships have.
Mm-hmm. I think the struggle, I think that it's really helpful to think about doing ministry in that context and to try to create opportunities for people in weaker relationships to do things together. But one of the struggles that I can see, so in our church, there are two major families that are a part of our church. And they don't make up, I would say they make up a quarter to a third of our church, if you add them all together. But like, we have 4 sisters that come to our church, 2 of which are twins. So there's a dynamic there. Like, they've known each other their whole lives. And so you have to like separate them in order to create the weaker relationships. But it's really easy to like fall into those, habits of just spending time with the people that you know best. And I'm not saying that like our church is terrible at it or anything like that. I'm just saying that when we know someone or know some people really, really well, sometimes it's just, that's our comfort zone. Like we don't want to always get outside of our comfort zone to really get to know other people, even though we know that that's what we should do. So, David, what do you think? How can you break free from some of those, well-established relationships?
Yeah, and that is precisely that is precisely the challenge. This is where these two things interrelate. Dunbar's number tells us that is exactly what we're going to do as human beings. When we're in this under 150 thing, we're going to lean into those deep relationships, and that's where it falls on us. As leaders and as the shepherds of our congregations, to literally disciple people to think about those types of things. I know that I will often fall into the trap myself, just as a pastor, of saying, I'm going to be the person who goes out here and who welcomes this individual and establishes a weak relationship. And the thing that's most important for me to do is really to identify a couple of people. One of those sisters, I'm just using your example, Kathleen, I'm going to bet that one of those sisters is more gregarious and outgoing than the others. And just grab that one sister and start just badger is not the word I'm looking for.
I don't know. It might be the right word.
But coaching. Really investing in her, the value that this has, not even for the church, but for the walk with Jesus that somebody's going to have.
Yeah.
Somebody's future walk with Christ is going to be just, it's going to be supercharged by your taking the time to spend 10 or 15 minutes with them on Sunday morning instead of huddled around the coffee thing, huddled up with the rest of my family. And, coaching a couple of people to come alongside you with that. And and being the, and we've all done fresh expressions a little bit, to use that fresh expressions nomenclature. It's the person of peace for our congregation. This is going to be the person who links our congregation with with the people that might come in from the outside. It's a caught, it's a caught piece that comes along with that. I've had, I'm not going to say we've had some success, some failure with that, but that's where I would be looking at it. And the important thing for me to remember is that's the primary job, one of the primary jobs I've got.
Yeah.
As the shepherd of this congregation, is to help mold that instill in them this openness to the new, to the new person, and being intentional about those people, creating those intentional people, allowing the Holy Spirit to work in their lives. I don't know if that answers your question, and I don't know if that helps. It feels kind of obvious, but you know what? It's really kind of simple. It's just that we get so wrapped up in our roles that we forget those pieces a lot. I think, at least I do.
I definitely think I would agree that I sometimes. I think, oftentimes, and maybe this is just for myself, I recognize the need for myself to create these weak relationships with people. But I would say it more important to people, especially people starting to really kind of connect in, is it's actually more important that people have weak relationships with other people in church, even than and certainly over time as a pastor, the relationship strengthens and things. But that those relationships. When we've done a good job, I think, if I think back at the people over the years that I feel like our church has done a good job of helping kind of bring it into what we do as a church versus those who maybe we've struggled. I do think, if I think back on it, that it has been, were they able to start creating relationships with other people in church, and when that's gone well, and that there is a real leadership part of just. I loved how you actually said the way that you put it, David, when you said, this is how you make one of the ways you make a real tangible difference for somebody's relationship with Jesus in your church. And we think about, we talk about discipleship, we encourage people to be disciplers, and people instantly start to think, how am I supposed to comfortable enough that I teach a Bible study or something like that? Mm-hmm. And if you teach a Bible study, that's great. But honestly, it's when somebody new or somebody who's been around for a little bit at church who you haven't gotten to know yet, did you forgo the conversation with your sister or your brother-in-law and put that off till the next family gathering or the next week and go spend 10 minutes getting to know this person, the name of their kids, and where they live in town, and that doesn't sound like what I think we often make discipleship sound like, and it's not the fullness of discipleship by any stretch of the imagination, but it is actually a lot of what makes discipleship happen.
Yeah,
and especially in a smaller church. So, And doesn't seem like a heavy ask to people, right? I mean, some people would be, right? If you're a big time introvert, those aren't the people you should go encourage to do this. But if you're somebody at your church who's gregarious, they're like, just convincing, reminding them this is, have that conversation with your family member or your friend who you've known since you were 7. Have it the next time you're having dinner together. It's fine. And this time share it with somebody that you don't know, that you're getting to know. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved it. In the article, he referenced the folks, and we've got these folks, don't we? The people, the family members who just spent time at the family reunion on Saturday afternoon, and they were together for 8 hours, and now they're coming back together on Sunday, and just coaching those folks to say, hey, your family time, you had that on Saturday. Open the circle a little bit on Sunday, and then when you're done at church on Sunday, then you can go back to to Sister Maud's house and have lunch. I mean, that's what you're going to do. But while you're here, and open that up. And a part of this for me, Chris, has been this. I have simply asked myself, where are the points in our church where weak relationships can happen? Mm-hmm. That's as I've thought about our congregation, I've thought, okay, where are those points towards which I can push the newbie, so to speak, and if I don't have them, how do we begin to build them? Yeah, I think that's if I were going to give somebody one takeaway from this, that's what I would I would say. Identify them. You've got the places where strong connections are made. Yep. Where are the places where the weak connections can be made? And if I don't have them, how do I allow the Lord to start to build them in ours? At our church, the choir is our perfect spot. We've got a very traditional 9:00 service. It's still, we've still got the organ, the piano, the robes, the whole catastrophe is there for us at 9:00. And our choir director, Kathy McCoy, she's actually a person that I coached her along on this a little bit, and but not much because she's just naturally got this heart anyway. But she has embraced it full throttle, and a third of our church sings in the choir. And they have laughingly said, we're trying to get to the point where there are more people in the choir than there are in the congregation. And they're working their way there. They really are. But Kathy has constantly, anybody who's not in the choir, if they've been there 50 years, if they've been there 2 years, if they walked in the door for the first time, she's like, would you like to join our choir? And if somebody says, I really don't sing that well, and she says, great, you'll fit right in. Come and join us here. And she's got 25 people up there, for crying out loud. And not all of them, not all of them are going to go to Glenn's Cafe together after church. Yep. They are going to scatter in different directions. When you were talking earlier, Chris, about the other connections in the other circles we have in our small towns, they'll scatter to their other small circles. But the choir is a place where they function together for the glory of God, and they get to know each other some, not a lot, but they get to know each other some. And it's a place where people, Kathy has just done a beautiful job of turning the choir into a place of weak relationships for us. And it is just such a huge life-giving ministry because of that in our congregation. And so, like I said, I started looking for them, and I'm like, okay, there's one. Do I have any other places where there are weak relationships created? I love yours about your Bible study. Yeah, this is a place where weak relationships are created, where, and I would challenge anybody to, in our smaller churches and in our rural churches, to say, okay, I know I've got places where the strong relationships are made. Where are the weak ones made? And if I don't have one, how do I let the Lord start making one? So.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I always appreciate the conversations we have with you, David. It makes me think about all sorts of things, and sometimes it gives you a different perspective. And so hopefully that's been the case for our listeners today as well.
Yeah, we'll definitely put these two articles in the show notes. So if you want to take a look at them, like I said, they're both good reads and very informative, I think, and give you, you can, agree with our takes on the articles or disagree and think that either one is fine. And but yeah, certainly I think our prayer. One last thing that I thought is like a nice connection between the weak relationships and Dunbar's number. The Dunbar's number in the article makes a little bit of a reference, kind of thinking through, Jesus is in this idea has been, pushed to death probably in their literature. But the idea between, Jesus has, he's got the 120, he's got his 12 disciples, and then he's got James and John and Peter, and then even really just Peter as in terms of the people he's close, and that, it's probably still important for us to think through those things and to some extent of knowing that there are some of these relationships that we're going to have that are kind of at the core of who we are, and that there has but that in order to like kind of function well as a body of Christ, there is this kind of overlap. Obviously, we see these people who are all around Jesus's ministry, in and out all the time, who kind of would fit in that 120, who are very much at times right there with the disciples, but they're also doing a bunch of stuff for Jesus's ministry. He's sending them out into the towns and things too, and also that there's real place in that we kind of can think through. Have an idea of where your relationships are in that regard, right? That you have people, you have a group of people that are very close to you, but also that you have this wider network, and to kind of navigate those relationships and see them all in the light of like what God can use them to do for His kingdom. So I don't know if that was even really a coherent thought. It had just occurred to me. So there you go. Talking in circles now. This is when if you're preaching, it's time to stop.
Gotta land the plane, Chris. Gotta land the plane.
I can hear a professor in my ear saying it's time to stop.
Well, thank you, David. We appreciate you being on today, and we will see you soon.
Oh, thanks so much. It's always great to be with you guys. Look forward to seeing you at the Ascent Summit.
Rural Renewal Podcast is brought to you by Fresh Expressions and the Ascent Movement. Fresh Expressions is a worldwide movement of everyday missionaries who want to see churches thrive in places we eat, live, work, and play by leveraging the creativity and endurance of the inherited church. The mission of the Ascent Movement is to create a thriving, collaborative connection for the church to live out the Great Commission in today's context. One of the initiatives of the movement is the Mustard Seed Initiative. Inspired by the message in the parable of the mustard seed, the Mustard Seed Initiative seeks to empower small churches across North America, enabling them to grow in faith and impact within their communities.
To connect with this podcast, you can email us at podcasts@freshexpressions.com. Rural Renewal Podcast is hosted by Kathleen Blackie and Chris Blackie. It's edited by Joel Limbowen and produced by Kathleen Blackie and Jeanette Statz. Our senior director is Shannon Kaiser. A special thank you to Brad and Joni Perry of Alabaster Grace for the use of their music for our podcast.
If you have learned something or been encouraged by this podcast, please help us spread the word. You can give us a review on Apple Music or Spotify and share this episode on social media.
May God be merciful and bless us. May His face smile with favor on us. May your ways be known throughout the earth, your saving power among people everywhere. May the nations praise you, O God. Yes, may all the nations praise you. Let the whole world sing for joy because you govern the nations with justice and guide the people of the whole world. May the nations praise you, O God. Yes, may all the nations praise you. Then the earth will yield its harvest, and God, our God, will richly bless us. Yes, God will bless us, and people all over the world will fear Him. Psalm 67.